One of the most misunderstood concepts in personal finance is tax brackets. I was actually talking with my sister about this about 2 weeks ago, and she came to me and said, "Man, Nathan, my taxes have really spiked. I was paying 22% of my income in taxes, and this year that's climbing up to 24%. And I looked at her, and what she said was, yeah, on every single dollar I make now, I'm paying 24% in taxes, not 22%. And that is one of the biggest misconceptions about a tax bracket. I used to advise companies on how to allocate their finances, but during that process, I realized while a lot of people know how to help companies allocate finances, they're a little less sure about what to do with their own personal finances. With that being said, let's get into it. If you have any doubts on what a marginal tax rate is or how a tax bracket works, stay tuned and this video is for you. Let's use some grains of rice to illustrate how exactly tax brackets and marginal tax brackets work for when you look at income taxes. Let's go to the sim.
Pretend we're working somewhere way back in the day. We get a new job and our boss decides to pay us, you know what, our first day, 10 grains of rice. He gives us the 10 grains of rice and we take it home. We go to sleep and the next day we hear a knock at our door. The door creaks open and standing outside is a face that we do not want to see. Standing outside is the tax man. He looks at us and says, "I heard you got a new job," and we just nod. Afterward, he tells us, "You know what that means? I heard you made 10 grains of rice yesterday. I need 10% of that." Comes in to our front foyer, takes a single grain of rice and leaves with it. The next day we go to work and our boss, he was happy with all that we did on our first day. And so he gives us a raise. For the day, we end up taking home 40 grains of rice. So now we have made 50 grains of rice total. We take our 40 grains, go home, and we're excited. We've been doing well at our job and the raise was well deserved, even if it's only been a day. We wake up again to the same knock. Again, the tax man is standing there at our door, and this time he says, "Hey, I heard you got paid 40 grains of rice yesterday. That's 50 grains of rice total. You know what that means? I'm gonna take 12.5% of what you made yesterday." So he comes in, grabs the 5 grains of rice, and heads out. We are continuing to do great at our job. We get in work and our boss, again, so impressed with what we did yesterday, says, "I can't give you as big of a raise as I did yesterday, at least not yet. But for today, why don't you take home 50 grains of rice? It's day 3 and we've made a total of 100 grains of rice. Half of that actually came from today." We take our rice home, happy as we could be. We go to bed, and again the next day, the knocking starts. Again, the tax man, he's here. He looks happier than ever to see the sad look on your face. He says, "Hey, I heard you made 50 grains of rice yesterday. That's 100 grains of rice total. That means you've stepped into a new tax bracket. I'm gonna have to tax you 22% on the 50 grains of rice that you made yesterday." He comes in, takes 11 out of your 50 grains from yesterday's haul, and goes home. You get into work, getting pretty annoyed with the tax man coming by every day. But your boss has just a message to turn your mood around. He looks at you and says, "You have done so well the past 3 days. I am doubling what I gave you yesterday. Why don't you take home 100 grains of rice?" You happily pack up your 100 grains of rice and you go home, off on your merry way. The tax man, he's come around again. But you greased the door yesterday, so there's no creaking. Door swings open. Tax man is standing there. He's ready to congratulate you. Well done on getting your raise to 100 grains of rice. That puts you up to 200 grains total, right, that you've made? And you solemnly nod your head. You know what that means? You've jumped another tax bracket based on the total amount that you've made. So for that 100 grains of rice that you've collected, I'm going to be taxing that at 24%. He comes in, grabs 24 grains of rice, and walks out. The next day, you go to work, and your boss says, "Hey, you actually didn't do as good of a job as I expected yesterday. And it's the end of the week. I don't have much left to pay you. So today, you're gonna have to take a pay cut." Your day's already not going super well because of the tax man. This makes it even worse. He gives you 50 grains of rice, bringing you up to 250 total for your entire pay working for this individual. You take your 50 grains of rice and you head home. Taxman comes around the next morning, as is tradition. Door swings open. Taxman says, "Hey, I know it's the weekend and you don't have to go to work until Monday, but I came here to collect your taxes just before the weekend starts." Well, it's already started, but I want to just get ahead of my work a little bit. You look at him dumbfounded and he says, "Oh, I see you've jumped another tax bracket. 50 grains made yesterday, 250 grains total. I'll be taking 32% of what you made." He comes in, grabs 16 grains of rice and walks out. You wake up. Now, a couple days have gone by given it was the weekend, and you're ready to go back into work. You've had a great weekend and you've spent a bunch of time on household projects, including setting up a doorbell on your front door. You get into work and your boss makes your day even better. What your boss says is, "Hey, you've done an excellent job for the past 5 days. And around here, we like to give our employees a weekly bonus for the work that they did the previous week." Your boss looks at you and says, "Including your bonus, today you will have made 375 grains of rice." You're ecstatic. Your pockets are overflowing with grains of rice. And so you happily go home. The next day, in the morning, you hear, door opens up and you see in front of you the taxman. The taxman looks excited today. He says, "Wow, 375 grains of rice. We've done very well here, haven't we? That means total earnings that you have are up to 650 grains of rice." You know what that means? You're in a new tax bracket. That tax bracket is 35%. And so I'm going to take from you 131 grains of rice. He takes his dues and he goes home. Get up and head into work. Once you're there, your boss says, "Hey, contract is over. This is your last day that you'll be working with us. But at least you'll go home with the highest pay you've seen on any day. Outside of the day, you got your bonus." It was a lot of corporate speak for just saying you're going to get 100 grains of rice to take home for the day. You take the 100 grains of rice and go home. The next morning, the door opens. There's Taxman, but also your old boss. What's he doing here? Taxman says, "Hey, 100 grains of rice. You know, that means another tax bracket. This time, I'm going to take 37% of what you made yesterday. You made 100 grains of rice, and now you've made 725 grains total." He comes in and takes 37 grains of rice. But that doesn't explain what your boss is doing here. And your boss looks at you and says, "Hey, sorry. I've been in cahoots with the taxman this entire time." And now you're extremely confused. And what your boss says is, "Yeah, I mean, look, it could have been way worse. I could have come back and taxed everything that you made at 37%. But that's not how taxes work here. In total, you paid the taxman 225 grains of rice. But you made 725 grains of rice when you were working for me. That works out to a 31% tax rate. We didn't tax everything you made at 37%. And if you work back the clock to day 3, when I had paid you 50 grains of rice, you had taken home 100 total from this contract at that point, you only ended up paying the taxman next day morning a total of 17 grains of rice across those 3 days worth of earnings. That's 17%. That's very different than the 22% tax bracket that was there at that time. To you, this is starting to make sense. The way that the tax brackets work is that each bracket has a percentage, and that percentage is applied to any earnings that are made within that bracketed set. So what that means is the total taxes that you pay, or your effective tax rate, will generally be lower than the tax bracket you're in. In fact, it has to be lower than the tax bracket you're in. But you're still squinting at this man. Why is he with the tax man? And he looks and says, "Hey, believe it or not, the tax man and I," they look at each other, their eyes lock, and they say, "We're part of the same trivia team. We were doing this to build bonds." And you look, slam the door, and never interact with that boss again, and apply for a new tax man. Now, this story with the rice, you can actually see the tax brackets I chose for the story are not by accident. These brackets are very, very, very close to the tax brackets that you see in the United States, at least as of 2025, if you multiply every single grain of rice by $1,000. And so why don't we actually translate this into dollars real quick? As you're seeing on the screen, we are pretending we have a $725,000 salary, similar to what we were talking about within our grains of rice scenario. As every single bar is animated on the screen, you can see a part of it is kept and a part of it goes to tax. At the end of all of this, when you combine all of our income, what you see is we have kept $499,000, give or take, and have given away to tax $225,000. This ends up being about a 31% tax rate. However, you can see at the bottom of our screen here that we're in the 37% tax bracket. So our effective tax rate is lower than what our marginal tax bracket is. So far, we've only talked about the federal income tax, but there are two other taxes that are federal taxes that are taken on any sort of individual in the workplace. And typically, these taxes are more flat taxes. These two taxes are Social Security and Medicare. With that, let's explain what a flat tax is first before we tackle Social Security and Medicare individually. For a flat tax, it doesn't matter if we have 5 grains of rice or we have 200 grains of rice. The tax percentage on each will be the exact same. Say our flat tax rate is 20%. In that case, from my 5 grains of rice, I will take away 1 grain. And from my 200 grains of rice, I will take away 40 grains for taxes. Now, Social Security is effectively a flat tax with a cap on it. Social Security is a little bit easier to understand than income taxes, but the Social Security limit is $176,100 for what can actually be put towards Social Security tax. The Social Security tax up to that income limit is 6.2%. So if I have 172 grains of rice here and I take 6.2% out, this translates to about $11,000, or in this case, 11 grains of rice. Now say I make an additional 200,000 or 200 grains of rice on top of this. Because the Social Security tax is capped, none of this income is allowed to be taxed. Medicare is also a flat tax on your income with a progression point. Said differently, Medicare acts very, very similarly to a 2 tax bracket system. Say I have $200,000 or I make $200,000 in the year 2025, which will represent with 200 grains of rice. Given I have 200 grains of rice, the Medicare tax rate for up to 200K is 1.45%. This translates to a tax of $2,900, or in our case, about 3 grains of rice. Now say I make an additional 200K. Again, another 200 grains of rice. For this 200K, or said differently, for any dollar that you make over 200K, the tax rate for Medicare goes to 2.35%, at least again in the year 2025. And so this will translate to a tax of $4,700 for this 200K that I've made. Or in terms of our grains of rice, it'll be about 5 grains. That's a quick summary of the different types of taxes that you'll see on income. Remember, for income taxes, they are based on marginal tax brackets. And so for any dollar you make in a specific tax bracket, you will be taxed at that specific percentage within said tax bracket. It doesn't apply to your total income. Social Security and Medicare function much more as flat taxes. And with that really is the basics of all income taxes.
Thank you guys for tuning in, going through all these rice counting exercises, and of course, that little Python animation. With that being said, if you guys like the video, make sure to comment, like, subscribe down below. And until next time, I'll catch you guys later.